Before we get started, all 4 of these decks are available to play on Steam Workshop in the link in the description right now. Keep in mind that all 4 are still being tweaked and adjusted, so in this time we would greatly appreciate any feedback you have for balancing or just constructive criticism in general. That can be directed to us via Steam, or if you just want to join our Discord community, we'd love to have you, and the link is also in the description for that. Enjoy the video. Alright, so Skull Kid is basically a power grinder and I guess burner deck would probably be the best term. There's not really, as far as I've seen and played, there's not necessarily a good equivalent deck, which is also why I like it, because I feel like I hit a relatively unique niche here. So to start, this is your board configuration. You obviously have your basic action symbols and all that, but you have the villain deck, the fate deck, and then the mask deck, which has a few relatively complicated rules that we'll get to later. You have a mask token that starts off of any tiles, the ocarina token, which you don't have to move a Skull Kid. You can put it anywhere just to signify which side it's on, and once again we'll get into that. And then you have, of course, Link, who must begin the game wearing the Deku transformation mask and starts in Clock Town. The Deku transformation mask is effectively a nerf for the Link hero card and serves as the Skull Kid player's first interaction with the concept of masks. At the beginning of each Skull Kid turn, another player rotating clockwise around the table will move Link. Once again, this rotates and should be different each turn. So, currently, Link can move 2 spaces, but due to his smaller size with the Deku mask, he does not actually block any effects at the top. The Deku mask can only be removed via a special fate card. Currently, in our playtesting, this is usually okay because Link can effectively start steamrolling, being a huge burden on the Skull Kid player. So this difficult nerf on the fate cards balances that out, but that's another thing that we would love to hear some feedback on so we can tweak that mechanic a little bit. But anyways, there's a fate card called Deku Bubble, and that allows Link to take the ocarina back from Skull Kid. And once again, that's really all that ocarina token signifies. This mask must be removed the first time by acquiring the ocarina. So now, as listed in the rulebook, the Fate players have the ability to, instead of a couple other options which we will get into, they can now do the mask phase. Once the mask phase has been unlocked, after a player moves Link for the turn, they can either do nothing, draw a mask, or swap out an owned mask with the current mask Link is wearing. Keep in mind, a mask must be worn, unless stated otherwise in the card description, for at least 1 full turn. And once more, the only thing that can remove the Deku transformation mask is after Link owns the ocarina token. For example, if we were to draw a card, you can get cards that hurt you. Blast Mask, Link is instantly killed by this mask. And all hero and ally cards are moved to an adjacent space of Skull Kid's choice. When Link dies, he gets discarded, loses the mask that he was wearing, it is removed from the game, and then at the start of Skull Kid's next turn, Link returns to Clock Town. Now don't get too excited. A lot of these masks will prove to be a huge pain for the Skull Kid player. There's smaller effects, such as the Bunny Hood, which more or less acts as the Deku transformation without the nerf. But there's also much stronger effects, such as the Captain's Hat, which makes everything cost extra power, and given that Skull Kid's engine's goal is to get power, this can really slow you down. When you draw another mask, it is immediately swapped out for Link's current mask, regardless of what the player who is moving Link at the time desires. If at any point after one full turn, where you do not draw a mask, and you would like to swap them, you can. And while I won't spoil the effects of every mask, there is one that you definitely need to be aware of. The Garrow's mask will break Skull Kid's engine, and this is a large thing that the other players using Link are going to look for. If this card is on Link, Skull Kid can no longer use the effect of Iconia's Curse, which is a large major engine piece. This effect ends when the mask is removed, whether or not there is time on the counter left. That is very important. However, if the card is not on the engine... That being said, if this engine card is not in play already, this card will actually allow Skull Kid to find it. Keep in mind that both of these effects can only happen once in a game. The rest of the Fate deck is going to also give you some very powerful and interesting effects that are very thematic to the game of Majora's Mask. For example, you can find many familiar faces, such as Anju and Kafei, and both of these Fate cards will allow you to find the Sun and Moon mask, which you can then combine for the Couple's mask, and they all have effects which interact with each other and boost each other. And I feel like people who have played the game will recognize the story beats there, and everyone knows that that's everyone's favorite side quest. Now, not only does having the Ocarina token allow for the players moving Link to use the mask phase, but it also allows for them to use some very hard-hitting Fate cards, such as Song of Time and Oath to Order. And trust me, once you start playing this deck, you will dread seeing these two come up. Skull Kid's goal is to crash the moon into Clocktown, and this can be done by first playing the Majora's Mask card. This card allows you to advance the moon to Icona, and gives you a very useful effect for later. You do this by advancing the moon token to the mentioned space. Next, the Skull Kid player's goal is to play the 3 time cards. These will tell you which space respectively to move to, and if any of these are removed from the field by a card such as a Guardian Giant, then you have to return the moon back to the tile in question. The Skull Kid player's end goal is of course to play a Terrible Fate. If the moon token is in Clocktown and you play this card, crash the moon into Termina, and you win. Now, a lot of those prices may have seemed high, but don't worry, Skull Kid will be able to manage. The forms of Majora itself, being the Mask, Incarnation, and Wrath, will prove to be very useful. Not only will they be cheaper if you sacrifice the older version of themselves, but they can allow you to find the time cards. These 3 cards also work together with one engine piece, aptly named Tentacles. This card gives you a different effect based on the form of Majora you have in play, or if you have all of them, you pick and choose. The Skull Kid has many other tricks up his sleeve as well. For example, some pretty interesting condition cards. If a player draws 2 or more cards in one turn, you discard one of your own allies and gain power from them. Or, when another player gains 4 or more power, you gain half that amount rounded up. This is not the end of it, though. We have other fun cards, such as draw 3, discard 2 of the 3, or discard your entire hand and draw the amount of cards discarded. Lastly, we have a card Demonic Bribes. This card will give a tile or location either a discard or power action. Now, if you'll notice, there's a trend here where we want to discard cards, and that is because, as you may have noticed both from Tentacles and a few other cards in here, which will likely leave a surprise for you, Skull Kid can easily find cards in his discard. Your goal, a lot of the time, will be if you find a card you want later or a card you can't afford at the moment, it's probably much better for you to discard it, and then you'll be able to find it and likely play it for cheaper later. This system is largely propelled by Skull Kid's main engine cards, those being Gibdo Curse. Select a card from your discard pile, then discard cards from your hand. Play the selected card for 2 less power for each card discarded in this way. And the complement to that card, gain 2 power for every card you discard for any reason not involving a Vanquish action. This includes the effects of Greedy Sacrifice, which is the condition card we showed earlier. Now, these two obviously combine very well. There is 1 copy of Icana's Curse in the deck and 2 Gibdo Curse cards. Obviously, Gibdo Curse cards are ones that you discard after playing. But these allow you to not only find a card from your discard and play it for cheap, but you actually can gain power because you're discarding cards. And that is a large reason why Link has a card that can disable your engine. And then, of course, among all the other familiar faces, we have everybody's favorite, or least favorite, I guess, depending on if you enjoyed the game. Odalwa, Got, Georg, I want to meet whoever at Nintendo named that one, and Twin Mold. These can prove as very useful allies, or if you're in a situation where they're not useful, maybe they're just fodder and you throw them away to gain a little extra power. That is the large selling point of this deck. It seems relatively straightforward goal-wise at first. You just move things to the discard, get some power for doing so, bring them back. But as you play, and certainly as we played, we realized that this deck has so many situational options where you're going to need to adapt to whatever's happening, to whatever the other players are doing, to whatever's coming out of your Fate deck. And the deck allows for that. It gives you a lot of different options and a lot of different strategies to focus on. And I hope you guys enjoy that. Also, side note, of course Fear's Deity Mask is in the game. All in all, I think this deck should prove to be a fun deck to play. It should be able to be a different, unique experience, both in general and on repeated plays as the situations change and you have to take different actions to respond to your opponents. I also tried to design this to give the other players something to do and to keep them interacted and interested with it as well, because there's some decks that are just confusing and take long turns, and I know that there's a lot of mechanics here, but they're all pretty straightforward. I mean, the rulebook here is pretty short. But we did have a game where Link never got the mask removed, and the Fate card still did a lot of damage, but you know, he didn't get to cover anything or use masks. And then the first time we played, Link got it removed pretty early on, and then anytime I almost got to playing Terrible Fate, I'd get faded, and they'd remove my time cards, and then I'd get close to playing it again, and then I'd get faded again, and they got stupidly lucky and got another thing that removed my time cards, and just, it's a deck that, and obviously I'm a little biased because I made it, but it's a deck that felt fun even to lose at. So I hope you enjoy, and leave us some feedback because we'd love to hear it.